So it's been a while since I did a video looking at anything from this creator, but she recently did a video which was basically titled What I Miss About Living in the USA After Moving to Australia. So I thought this would be a good comparison one to look at. So this is Ashley Fay Vlogs. I'll put the link in the description to the video, the original video, so that you can go watch it for yourself if you like, or you can go and subscribe to her channel. She's one that I have mixed feelings about because she can be a little bit negative at times. I haven't actually watched this video in full, so I'm hoping that it is not quite as negative as some of her previous ones. But let's just jump in and see what she has to say.
So I really wanted to chat about something that I don't think I've sat down and cohesively chatted about yet here on the channel, which is things that I miss about the US after living in Australia for over 2.5 years. First, it is more accepted in the US to speak your mind. I've talked so many times about my opinions on tall poppy syndrome. I completely understand that being an expat and having this outside lens, my view on what tall poppy syndrome is going to greatly differ from, say, an Australian's perspective. But regardless of that concept in general, I'm not going to get too far into it. I'll link some videos where I talk more about it, so I'm not like ranting about the same topic again. Separately from that, I just find that in the States, it's a lot more accepted to speak your mind in whatever way. Now, of course, it can be very, very toxic. I'm not even going to get into the recent election or else I'm going to start crying. But I do miss the directness that a lot of Americans have. I find that a lot of, again, this is very generalized, but a lot of Australians that I know just avoid confrontation at all cost, and there isn't as direct of a relationship or communication style. Whereas in the US, I've found, like, whether it's with friends in the workplace, in my experience in the US, it's a lot more direct communication. And just not beating around the bush, like, just be honest. Like, in the comments, I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of really honest people giving their honest opinion on this video. And as long as you do it in a respectful way, I love that. Like I said, in the workplace, friendships, your opinion on a business or a coffee or a bagel. I've had my fair share of experiences here in Australia where I believe I do it in a respectful way, like, oh, I'm not a massive fan of the extraction of this coffee or the density of this bagel, to like super petty crap, like nothing revolutionary. And I find that a lot of Americans are a lot more open to feedback and constructive criticism over a lot of my experiences here in Australia.
Okay, so we're not off to a good start here. She's brought up this tall poppy syndrome thing multiple times. Usually it comes with an attack on Tasmania, so it's refreshing that this time around she's not bad-mouthing Tasmania. But she brings it up so many times. She's like, well, I've been here 2.5 years and I miss the directness of Americans. If you've been here 2.5 years, you've had more than enough time to adapt to the way of doing things in Australia. We are polite, and maybe your way of doing things, you don't see that as rude, but Australians do. And you need to acknowledge that, and you need to adapt and start acting in the same way as Australians do. It's not tall poppy syndrome. It's quite simply a case of Australians don't like people who are brash, who come across as brash and rude. And basically, unfortunately, she does quite often. I think the key word when she's talking about criticising coffee and bagels is petty. She comes up with petty things about them and puts them on videos. She shows a business, she names a business, and then she badmouths it on the internet for something really, really petty that most people would think, well, actually this is really nice coffee, or this bagel is actually not too bad. But she puts this really high standard on it. Now, I've got to say, her saying that she appreciates people being honest and saying about in the comments, I've had multiple people on my channel in the past when I've spoken about Ashley Fay. They've said to me that where they've disagreed with her in comments, their comment has been deleted. So I don't know how that comes in as being honest in comments. If you can't cope with people disagreeing with you and come back with a polite answer, then deleting comments is just a little bit rude. I do feel that she needs to start trying to take a more positive approach in her videos, and definitely a more positive approach to Australia. Otherwise, if you really dislike it that much, why are you still here?
Number 2, something that I miss about the US is my fitness bike.
Okay, I have edited out a massive chunk here because this was basically just an advertisement for a company who gave her a free bike. One thing I will give this girl, she seems to be very good at getting companies to give her 3 free things for her to promote on her videos. I'm actually not a fan of creators who do this, but each to their own.
How late things are open. Now, again, very dependent on where in the US you're comparing to where in Australia, yes. However, just in general, the amount of 24-hour department stores, or not even 24-hour, but just things that are open past 6 p.m. in the States. I know Thursday late night shopping is a thing in Australia in some places, but just how late things are open, how much later coffee shops are open, like the fact that you can really easily find a coffee shop that is open past 2 p.m. and a coffee shop that is open on the weekends is insane. Now, to preface, especially for those who are unaware, here in Australia, the wage differences and penalty rates for payment on weekends, even Sundays, public holidays, is much higher. So then, yes, it does cost the business owners a lot more to run, but I do still greatly appreciate if a cafe is open on the weekends or is open past 3 p.m. because the amount of times that I've wanted a coffee and I've looked at my phone and it is like 2:59 and I'm like, are you kidding me? When I was working more traditional working hours in Tasmania, I would come into work and everything would be shut, and it was really difficult to try and naturally balance running errands, getting things done, and working a full-time job. Whereas my current job, my full-time hours are a bit more flexible, so I don't run into that anywhere near as much. And also, Melbourne is Melbourne. I live in Melbourne, if you didn't know, or check out these videos.
Okay, first of all, has no one amongst these creators heard of the Beechworth Bakery? And I'm sure it's not the only bakery that is open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and has coffee the entire time. I think if you were really looking for a cafe that was open after 2 o'clock and you genuinely were looking, you would find one. I think there is certainly no shortage here in Bendigo, and we are far smaller than Melbourne. I can't see how someone living in Melbourne could be complaining about there not being somewhere open after 2 o'clock where you can go and buy a coffee. Now, in terms of trading hours, it seems to me the only people who complain about this are people who are not from Australia. I have no problems with the shops closing at 5 on weekdays, or closing. Some places here in Bendigo are closed on a Sunday, like some clothing and shoe places. It's about time management. If you know, supermarkets are open till 8, 9 o'clock at night, so that's not an issue. If you can't manage to get to the supermarket in that very long 12, 13, 14 hour period of time that they're open, well, that's on you, that's not on them. Bottle shops are open 12, 14 hours. Nobody works a 12, 14 hour day. As for things like novelty stores, shoe shops, clothing stores, even if they do close at 5, we have 7-day trading here in Australia. So do what most people do, go out on a Saturday morning and go shopping. If you go to Bendigo, the busiest time in Bendigo is Saturday because everyone's out and about shopping at all the different places in Bendigo. Yes, the big thing here is wages, and certainly I wouldn't want to see a trade-off and have people living on wages or trying to live on wages where there's not enough money for them to even pay their rent. As opposed to what we have here, we have a decent minimum wage, which allows people, for the most part, to get by at least. It's certainly a damn sight better than places that do have 24-hour trading. And let's face it, at the end of the day, if you're really desperate, there's always going to be a 24-hour service station somewhere.
I have so many criticisms about the United States of America. Now more than ever, I am the first person to criticize the US. I have zero qualms doing so, but the US does do cold coffee really well. They do it really well. You can get a massive coffee for relatively cheap, and sometimes it tastes fine. I do hate Starbucks, but I do miss like a good Dunkin' Donuts, like just black cold brew, or there's a couple more like specialty places near where I'm from in New Jersey that just do really good cold brew, cold coffee. It's becoming more and more of a thing here in Australia, especially in the last 2 years. Like when I first came to Australia and then when I lived in New Zealand like a couple years ago, it was really difficult to find cold coffee. So it's more common now, but still I do miss like especially just like a cold brew or the US version of iced coffee, which is different than the Australian, fun fact.
Okay, well, that's definitely a cultural thing. For me, unless it's an iced coffee or a frappe or just a dare iced coffee, then I can't imagine actually getting enjoyment out of it. I've seen pictures of what they call iced coffee, and it looks like it's just coffee syrup with ice cubes in it. So, yeah, not a flavour that we enjoy here in Australia. So I can appreciate that it would be something that you would miss. Perhaps it's something that, if it is something you enjoy that much, maybe working out how to make your own version of it at home, perhaps. I know in terms of iced coffees and iced chocolates, my aunt used to make the best iced chocolates when I was growing up that were better than anything I've ever tasted anywhere else. So, experiment at home maybe and learn how to make whatever these cold coffees are that you particularly enjoy, perhaps. Certainly, I can understand though, missing something like that. For me, after moving from Tassie, the availability of curried scallop pies here in Victoria is somewhat lacking, and it's something that I miss. So I understand where she's coming from.
Food. Oh my goodness. I feel like food is just like a notorious thing for anyone to miss about, whether it's their home country, somewhere they've traveled. It's just like a unanimous thing where it's like, yes, I can crap on so many other things about where I'm from, but there is a lot of good food. There's a lot of good food here in Australia, but I miss diners, so much. Melbourne has this one diner, and I won't even say their name because it is not a diner. It is absolute crap, and I had such bad service experience there too, so it just made the experience even more sad. But I just really miss going to a diner and having really cheap, quick food. That's another thing, is in the States, it's a lot more common to find options for like cheap, quick food that isn't necessarily fast food, but like diners, you can be in and out in like 20 minutes sometimes. Or for example, I also really miss like Mexican food or Italian food, but a lot of Mexican and Italian food places that I've been to here in Australia are very like fancy when they don't necessarily need to be, in my opinion. Like I would totally be fine with like a not fancy spaghetti bolognese with no frills, like just good food. But if you have any recommendations, please let me know down in the comments. And also if you've just experienced in general, like if you've moved somewhere and you find, well, of course, different countries are gonna have different cuisines and are gonna have different specialties. Like Australia has incredible Asian cuisine in comparison to the US, which makes sense because we're a lot closer to Asia over here. But it's just interesting to see the differences in the market. Like clearly there is a market for more higher end Italian food, whereas in the States people are like, oh, well, I could do that, but I could also just go down the road to the pizza shop and get like really cheap, really good, really quick food. So I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if you've experienced this.
Okay, there's so much to say there. First of all, in terms of a quick sit down eat, she lives in Melbourne. The choices are absolutely endless. And yeah, maybe it's not diner food, but I'm pretty certain there are still places where you can get a toastie or a burger or something and sit down and eat it and not have to wait a long time. So I'm not quite sure what the difference is there. In terms of Mexican food, I can understand there because, you know, Mexico right over the border from the USA. So yes, there are some much nicer Mexican foods from what I gather in the United States. What we have here is probably more of a attempt at Mexican food from what I gather. Although having watched One Pack Wanderers, I believe that they did at least give us a good review on Mexican food here in Australia. In terms of Italian food, sure, you can actually go to a pizza shop here in Australia and buy plain pasta, spaghetti bolognese, lasagna, carbonara, all the plain ones. But the difference here is that we have got a very large Italian population here. Going back to, you know, migrants from the 70s, 60s, 70s, whatever, and that has had a huge influence on Italian restaurants here. So we do have a lot of good quality Italian restaurants in Australia. I don't see that as a bad thing. If you've got plain tastes, you can still get basic Italian in italics, or in quotes. You can get basic Italian stuff at a pizza shop, but if you do want quality Italian food, then go to an Italian restaurant and you will get quality Italian food. But there's, you know, there is a choice there.
Keeping on the food train, dipping sauces and condiments. I've touched on this before as like a massive culture shock of mine moving to Australia from the US, is how so many places here in Australia you have to pay extra for dipping sauces, sometimes even for ketchup, or the equivalent here a lot of the times is tomato sauce. It's not always the case. Like you can still go to McDonald's or Macca's as we call it here and get like the included condiments or free ketchup or whatever. But the amount of places that I've been to where it's like $2 extra for this sauce, and it's not even, it'll be like aioli, it'll be barbecue sauce. Like, it won't be anything super crazy. And I have had people be like, oh, well, that's because they make their own sauces, and so naturally the cost is higher because they make their own. And I totally understand that for like more specialty places, like especially if you're making your own sauce, like I'm happy to pay more. But if I just want like your cheap off the cuff ketchup, I really don't want to be paying $2 extra, especially if I'm already like paying extra for the fries because they don't come with the burger. It's frustrating to then be like, oh right, I have to think when I'm ordering how much sauce I'm gonna need because they come in the little tubs, and pre-purchase them.
If she's referring to those little squeezy things of tomato sauce, where you squeeze them and they split open and the sauce comes out, I've never heard of paying $2 for one of them. So I don't know where it is that she is going for food, but I think she possibly needs to explore a little bit more and find better places to go and buy food. Because, you know, it's been a while since I've been somewhere and got sauce like that, but usually you're talking 20, 30 cents for the sauce. And you tend to have a fair idea after you've had something several times of how much you need. You know, if you're buying a meat pie, you know you need just one of those sauce things. If you're buying chips, well, get gravy instead, that's free. You know, chips and gravy, that's part of the cost. In terms of having to pay extra for chips if you get a burger, again, I think it comes down to choosing where you go. You know, we have places that will do it as a meal. So you'll get your burger with chips and salad on the side, perhaps. But if you're looking at somewhere where the burger is one thing on the menu and chips are another thing on the menu, then sure, you're going to pay more. Don't forget, same again, we pay decent wages here in Australia. So, you know, businesses can't afford to be just giving away food. They still have to cover costs, and those costs include wages.
Driving speed limits. Oh my goodness. Driving speed limits. Just in general, the driving culture, of course, is so different between two countries. What a shocker. But living in New Zealand and then now living in Australia, just how much lower the speed limits are, which I'm sure, to be fair, has a lot to do with safety laws and less car crashes, which is great. But here in Australia, it is a lot easier to get parking fines, speeding tickets. There's a lot more speeding cameras, and the fines here are a lot higher, which again, I get on the other side of the coin that there are reasons for all of that. I'm sure it improves safety and all of that stuff. But I mean, to play devil's advocate, because this is, what I miss about the US, I do miss being able to go like over 60 kilometers an hour, or sorry, over 100 kilometers an hour, which is like around 60 miles an hour. Because it's like the minimum on a lot of highways in the US is well over the max speed limit in most of Australia and New Zealand, which is crazy to me. And there's a lot more of like a allowance, I guess, with speeding as well. Like here in Australia, they have all these signs like over is over. So if you go like 1 kilometer over, sometimes you can literally get a speeding fine. Whereas in the States, a lot of the times they give you a buffer of around 10 miles an hour. So it's just different. It's a bit more relaxed in the US, to say the least.
Okay, so let's acknowledge here that on the freeway, the speed is 110, not 100. I have to say, this is a very, very selfish comment to make. At the end of the day, I'm glad that I live in a country that doesn't have 400,000 deaths a year on the road, that doesn't have such a disproportionate ratio. 16 people in 100,000 in the United States die on the roads. In Australia, I believe it comes to 3.6 out of 100,000. So I'm glad that we have tough road rules. I'm glad that there are tough penalties for people who break the rules, because that means that not only me, but all the people that I love are safer on the road. You know, my sister and brother-in-law quite often head down to Melbourne because they've got a lot of friends down there, so they will frequently make trips down to Melbourne on the Calder Freeway. I don't have to worry, touch wood, about them making frequent trips on the Calder Freeway, because I know that there are laws to protect them from people who are going to be idiot drivers and drive way over the speed limit. I don't feel worried when I go for a drive down to Melbourne. Yeah, I'm not a fan of traffic, but at least I know that the laws mean that there is a diminished chance of me ending up in a serious accident. Yeah, it happens here in Australia, but at least nothing at all like what occurs in the USA. So I've got no complaints here. And yeah, I think it comes down to acknowledging that the more important thing in Australia is safety as opposed to personal gratification.
Walking fast very much falls into place with like my New York tri-state area isms, being from not far from New York City. But oh my gosh, even just hearing this come out of my mouth, I was like, I love this about the US. Wow, I don't say that very often, which is why I was like, this would be a fun video to sit down and film, because I don't really sit and rant about how much I love the US really often at all, because again, there's so much to criticize naturally. But walking fast, I love how in specifically the tri-state area, so many people walk with purpose. Like, it's very much like, I have somewhere to be, I have things to do, I'm gonna walk quite fast. Whereas more rural areas, whether in the US here or even cities here, like here in Melbourne, you don't get that as much. Like, it's more like taking it chill, taking it slow, and which is nice every once in a while, but I'm like, I'm going to cut you off on the sidewalk. Like, if you walk slow, I'm gonna cut you off and I'm gonna walk around you. Like, that's gonna happen, and I'm gonna walk fast. I just miss the walking speed limit, I guess, being increased in parts of the US.
Okay, I'm sorry, but to me that just sounds utterly ridiculous. Especially talking about rural places and then bucketing Melbourne in with that. Now, when you go to Melbourne, people are not dawdling down the street. Maybe people might be not walking as fast as what you would see in New York, but that's because we have a more relaxed lifestyle. We're not rushing everywhere. So I think it's about just adapting, learning to live in a country where work isn't our number one priority, so we don't have to dash from one place to the next because we're not earning money while we're walking through the city. And actually, it is a little bit rude to cut someone off by going past them like that. Yeah, you can walk around, but not cutting them off, if that's exactly what she means. So, yeah, I think she's having trouble adapting to living in Australia, by the sounds of it.
Just the amount of options for different things in the US, like manufactured goods, overall not being as expensive in the US compared to other areas. Like here in Australia, most things, if not, yeah, or we're going to be imported. Or I miss Target. I miss just going through the home section with my cold brew and getting things that I don't need, but also knowing that it won't break the bank. And there is Target here in Australia, which is really interesting because it's owned by Kmart, which is essentially, Kmart is more the equivalent of US Target, but Kmart in the US went bankrupt, or they all closed down. I don't remember the exact situation, but I've not seen a Kmart in the US in forever because I'm pretty sure they went bankrupt. There's nothing like just like the nostalgia of going through a Target and just the options in a US grocery store, department store, like just the insane amount of options, especially for me being dairy free. A lot of times I do find that like a lot of cafes and things here in Australia are a bit more accommodating, but then when you go to the grocery store or the department store, there's a lot more options in the US for like literally absolutely like every sort of snack that you need. Like the market is just a lot bigger over there. I miss Trader Joe's and just different products that you can't find here in Australia, like pumpkin puree, like the can of pumpkin puree to make pumpkin pie.
Okay, I've just got a cut in here. Pumpkin puree. You miss that you can't buy pumpkin puree to make pumpkin pie. So try going to the fruit and veg section. We actually have fresh pumpkin here. And all you have to do with that is chop it up, then either boil it, roast it, cook your pumpkin however you prefer to cook it, and puree that. Trust me, I know this because every time I make a batch of dog food, one of the things that goes in that batch of dog food is, you guessed it, pumpkin puree. Because they love their pumpkin. They love sweet potato more, so I always have to put sweet potato in. But you can do that with sweet potato too. You can make sweet potato puree. It's not that hard. In terms of Target, from other creators, it sounds like Kmart is basically the same as the American Target. Although I think someone said that Target in America has grocery items as well. But in terms of, homewares and stuff like that, sounds like Australia's Kmart is similar to America's Target. But correct me on that if I am wrong.
Last year I did a like mini Thanksgiving and here in Australia, and we ended up pureeing like fresh pumpkin, which worked out great. But it's just, the convenience of buying probably canned pumpkin with a crap ton of preservatives, but it works.
So actually it's not about the pureed pumpkin, it's about having all the crappy preservatives in it as well, perhaps. Because honestly, it takes very, very little effort to create pureed pumpkin. If you want to be really, really lazy, you can get your quarter pumpkin from the supermarket, wrap it in foil, chuck it in the oven for a few hours till it's super soft. That way you don't even have to bother cutting it. You just pull it out when it's really soft, scoop out the seeds, and then you can scoop out all the pumpkin. How much effort is that? That's not a lot more effort than basically opening a tin and scooping your puree out of the tin, and it's a damn sight healthier.
And going off that, just the online shopping, the US has a lot more options for manufactured goods. So online shopping like Amazon is so different over here. the same day delivery Prime or 24-hour delivery or next day delivery network in the US is insane now. I still don't really understand it, but here in Australia it's very much not like that, which 95% of the time I could care less about. But I do miss being able to go on Amazon in the US and just being like, oh, I can like order whatever, it's not that expensive, free Prime shipping, and I'm gonna get it tomorrow, and I don't even have to leave the couch. That is convenience at its finest. Whereas the Amazon here in Australia doesn't have anything like that, nor the amount of options.
Okay, so I actually had Amazon Prime for a while, and pretty much everything that I ordered through Amazon Prime was next day delivery. It was a quick delivery. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're ordering something on Amazon, you look for an Australian seller, and that means you're probably going to get it within the week. It may even be only 3 days before it arrives. If you can't wait that long, then maybe you just need to go down to Target or Kmart or Big W and go looking there for it. But I will also say you can buy stuff from Amazon in the United States. Some of it won't ship to Australia, but it'll actually say that. So even if you've got the Amazon app that is set to Australia, you can actually go onto the internet rather than use the app and go to amazon.com, which will take you to the American Amazon. You have to do the maths in your head because everything is in American dollars, but that way you can buy things, you can have more of an option of things. But at the same time, there's plenty other options than Amazon. You've got eBay, you've got Wish, various other ones like that, where you can get all manner of things. So, yeah, I don't think it's that bad here in Australia, is it? So that brings us to the end of her video. I apologise if I've sounded a bit negative. I probably shouldn't look at videos by this creator because I think she has really struggled to adapt to living in Australia and quite often comes across in a somewhat negative way, which to me is a little bit triggering because I tend to be one of these glass is half full people that always looks for the positive in the world around me. So when I see someone who is being a little bit negative about a situation, it frustrates me. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for listening. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. That gets my videos out there, gets them seen by more people. And please leave a comment also. When you leave a comment, that also gets my video further out into the algorithm and gets it seen by more people. So thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.